started. I want to allow these lovely people on my left an opportunity to do more speaking than I do. But I want to welcome you to the local foods panel and discussion. And I say discussion because I really want to encourage your participation and asking of questions when we get to that point. On my far left, we have Barb Holliday, who is the local food outreach coordinator with Hope of Mountain. Next to her is Marie Hirsch. She is the executive director of the Arlee CDC. And then George Pierce, who is the executive director of the Livingston Food Resource Center. I think I'll go ahead and start with Barb and then go from there. George, I think you've got the portable mic there. And they're going to give us a little bit of a quick overview of their organization and what type of local foods work that they do. And then we'll just open up the dialogue to get more in depth. So thank you, Barb.
So I am Barb Holliday, and I work for Hope of Mountain. Can you hear me okay? Can't hear you. No. I really want to thank you. Closer? Yeah. Yes, please. Okay. So I'm Barb Holliday. I work as a woman in the outreach coordinator.
We just can't hear you.
Yeah. Getting closer. I want to thank you, Gail, for inviting Hope of Mountain to be a part of this panel and this gatherings together. It's been an inspiring morning. Hope, if you don't know who we are, is a nonprofit based in Bozeman, Montana. I work remote from Helena myself. We invest in community leaders like yourself, and we're honored to be a resource and helpful in any way that we can for the work that you're doing. We really got into the local food arena as a front burner activity because of COVID-19. I'm sure you all deeply relate to that because we were hearing from communities that there were food shortages and access issues. At the same time, we were also hearing from producers who had surpluses of food because their markets have dried up due to lockdowns. So we began working with other organizations, like the two sitting next to me, and some of you sitting out there, and ultimately dubbed ourselves with an initiative called Local Food for Local Families. And we formed a partnership group, and I want to name all those folks and not forget anybody, so I'm going to read them off here. The Montana Food Bank Network, Western Montana Growers Co-op here in Missoula, Community Food and Ag Coalition based also here in Missoula, Mission West Community Development Partners, and the Food Enterprise Center up in Ronan, the Livingston Food Resource Center, Great Northern Development Center up in Wolf Point, Montana, and also Local Food Marketplace, which is located in Oregon, but they are a software platform that producers use, food hubs use, and we have this long-term vision to have an integrated, connected Montana Food Hub network. Together, once this partnership came together, we intentionally raised funds with the shared interest to create a more organized and robust food system that would support all of these food producers and emerging food hubs in the 5 that are currently in existence. And of course, food pantries. I'm really here today just to provide support in any way that I can to help you more easily access food. Up front, there's a bunch of handouts way down at the far end. There's contacts for Bonnie Sachatello-Sawyer, who's our primary pantry contact, and myself. I can help you source foods that you're interested in for your pantries. And then the 6 here are actually a regional list of local food producers, which I hope will be a really useful tool if you're looking to build more relationships and source more food locally. Another thing that we're working on as a Local Food for Local Families collaboration is a new website that I hope will get launched soon. And basically it will feature food, so we can start to look at food in real time and make it easier to go one place and find producers you can connect with, hubs that you can shop with, and food that you want to find. The other thing I wanted to mention is that we're working with Montana Food Pantry Collaborative, which is a new organization that's come together. Marie is a leader in that collaborative, along with Elle Ross, who's out there. Somebody, they would, Elle's in the back there. Both would be great people to connect with if you want to learn more about this pantry collaborative group. And last but not least, before I move on, I wanted to mention there is a Montana School Backpack Survey out right now. I don't know if you folks have seen that, but for any of you that are participating in that program, we would really value your input. And there is a handout up there with that survey link as well.
Good morning, I'm Marie Hirsch, and I'm the Executive Director of the Arley Community Development Corporation. And that's a whole lot of words that mean a lot of different things to a lot of people. For 20 years, the Arley CDC has been involved in community and economic development and had never hosted a food pantry until March of 2020 when the local church came over and said, help. There was a small pantry in a coat closet at a local church that went just in a few days' time beyond their capacity. So they came in and met with the team of people that were on the board of the Community Development Corporation, and they pivoted really fast and started doing the curbside delivery within about a week's time. So as all of you probably experienced, our lives really changed as to what we did within our organizations in a very short period of time. They hired me a few months later, and I was like, what does a food pantry have to do with economic development? Because I had a one-track mind about helping small businesses. And I want you to know that in a very short period of time, I began to very quickly understand that if people's basic needs were not being met, they couldn't contribute very well to their communities. So we wanted to grow up and be like George. It was Michael at the time, but it's George now. And so we went and visited there right away. We went and visited immediately because we knew what we had to do today, which was put food in boxes and get it out on a curb. But we had a vision for the future of what would that mean. We also engaged with an amazing person in our community who just happened to be available to help us as the leader. She'd been involved in food sovereignty for many years, but was able to come in and help us. She leads our food sovereignty committee, and I want to thank Shelley Fine. She's here with us today. She's a great resource to you as well in really understanding across the reservations the works that she's been doing for many years, but has brought incredible programming, and we'll answer the questions specific to that and as we get further into this. But one of the things I wanted to share with you that people ask me all the time, why is it that an economic development organization houses a food pantry? And we're really, really fortunate because as a result of the work that we're doing, one of the questions that we get asked when we convene and talk to food pantries is, how do you pay people to work in a food pantry? And I'm seeing a whole bunch of heads shaking. And I think this is a model that it's part of the work that we're bringing together in really looking at how do we work across our state collaboratively as well to help each of you be able to meet the needs that you have individually within your organizations. So I think that's a piece of what we can begin to tap into and think about in a broader and bigger scope. So we're able to pay our food pantry staff. They don't work full time, but I think it's an important element of understanding that we're contributing to our community by buying local foods and helping local farmers, but we're also contributing by employing and creating internships for local young people in our communities. So.
Hi everyone, my name is George Pierce. I'm the Executive Director of the Livingston Food Resource Center. Our organization, Local Food Purchasing, started out as a pretty small goal. How can we get local foods to our shoppers? And it's kind of evolved into something much, much bigger than that we're super proud of and I'm excited to share with you. It's really become a core part of our mission. What it looks like for us is, we purchase directly from farmers, so produce, meats, pulses, grains, flour, that sort of thing. We purchase through local distributors like Western Montana Growers Co-op, MFBN, all with the goal of keeping money in our state whenever possible. Even if we're going to be doing like a canned goods purchase, we're going to do it through employee-owned local grocery store like Town and Country Foods down in Southwest Montana, here, Harvest Foods. Similar situations like that. I guess taking a step back, the Food Resource Center itself is primarily a food pantry, but we have a lot of programs all centered around fighting hunger and poverty in our area.
Can't hear you, Jordan. Sorry.
Thank you. Sorry. Yeah, talking in the microphones. There we go. So yeah, like I said, we have a lot of programs based around fighting hunger and poverty in our area, and local food purchasing has become this kind of umbrella program that impacts all of the programs that we do. So for instance, when you come into our food pantry to shop, you'll see during the summer months, you'll see whole raw produce, local produce that we have on our shelves. You'll see value-added products like soups, pasta sauces. We're making our own hummus from Montana chickpeas. Freezer meals for those who maybe don't have access to traditional cooking equipment or maybe just don't have the time to make meals at home. During the winter months, we distribute frozen local produce. So we have a vegetable processing program where last year we purchased 6,000 pounds of local produce at the end of the harvest season, which we steam blanched, vacuum sealed, and froze all out of our commercial kitchen so that we can distribute local produce throughout the winter to all of our clients, which has been a great way for them to have not just local produce, but also access to quick nutrition because it is basically ready to heat and eat. In 2020, we opened a bakery in Livingston that serves not only as a retail bakery for our community, where we're making artisan breads, croissants, pastries, that sort of thing. It's all made with 100% Montana flour, and we're using that revenue to bake bread for our food pantry and for other food pantries as well, free of charge. So if you're interested in getting some of our whole wheat kamut bread that Danielle mentioned earlier, let me know. I'd be happy to connect you with that. And going forward, what we're looking into is helping other organizations, not just nonprofits, but school districts, hospitals, chefs, restaurants, getting them connected with the same resources that we have for purchasing this local food, and really trying to gain access, get everybody equitable access to local foods. My background, before I did this, I spent 15 years as a chef in mostly farm-to-table type high-end establishments where I thought what I was doing was being a really big part of the local food system, and really what I was doing was making it more exclusive. And so now I get the opportunity to share it with everyone, and it's become a huge, huge passion for me. Food always has been, but now that we get to share it with everyone, it's what we believe is the right thing to do, and that everybody deserves that equitable access to it.
Thank you. I have some questions. I'll go ahead and get some of the conversation rolling. And the first couple that I think I can kind of roll together, but for your organizations, each one of us have different focus areas that we work on within the state or even within multi-state. What are you considering local foods for your organization, and where do those local foods come from? So, whether it's your community or whether it's somewhere within the state, but what do you consider to be local foods for you?
Well, for us, local foods, it's almost like the bullseye model, right? Like we try to be as local as we can, especially in the summer months. We have a program at our local farmers market where we're trying to connect local families with local farmers. So we have a token program where we distribute produce tokens to families with children with the goal of connecting them with farmers, but also trying to educate them around where their food comes from. and why, a peach in February from Albertsons may not be that great because it's not seasonal. But beyond that, we try to talk to producers across the state, how to write colonies, any kind of produce farmers, other ranchers, meat ranchers, and then from there trying to keep it regional, if it's Rocky Mountain, that sort of thing. But and again, it can look different. It doesn't have to be all raw stuff. It can be, like I said earlier, if we were going to do a big purchase of canned goods, we would try to do that locally. Even if the product itself isn't a local product, we support local business through that.
I would say in Arlee, we're very similar. It's a real target area, and we are really absolutely one of the most amazingly blessed food pantries because we have a large organic producer less than 2 miles from our office. And every week she distributes over 500 CSAs in this region. And anyone who doesn't pick up their CSA, it comes to the food pantry. So every Thursday morning, we go and pick up those CSAs. It averages about 15 a week, which doesn't seem like a lot, but it's a huge volume of food that we end up with, that every week from about May 15th until November 1st, we always have something fresh. So that's one of our key areas of procurement. We purchase 4,000 pounds of carrots, potatoes, onions, and cabbage, beets. And we purchase those every year in the fall from this same organic farming community. And she stores it for us. And every week we go out and pick up just what we need out of the cooler. So we're really lucky because having that cooler space is crucial. We're still using onions and carrots and potatoes from that storage facility right now. So we're waiting for that next group of produce to come in. We rely really heavily on Hope Mountain as well. We've been able to receive funding where a funder will say, I want you to use X% of your dollars and we want you to put it back into your local or regional food economy. So we have gotten bison, beef. We've been able to, through the holiday season, we were able to get some turkeys from a local poultry farmer. We use the Hutterite families as well. We have lush, I don't know if any of you from the east side have ever driven up Highway 93 towards the Canadian border or towards Glacier Park, but it's probably one of the most beautiful and lush farmlands in Montana. So we have apples and cherries and pears are the predominant fruits that we receive. They're very seasonal. We do get some berries. We don't get a lot of berries. We try to buy berries in the spring, in the early summer, to provide berries to the people who are participating. We work with, you've heard Western Montana Growers is a term you've heard us, everybody's used it, I think, today at some point. Western Montana Growers started on the property that's owned now by Harlequin Farms, where we receive everything. So he picks up, or they pick up there almost daily. And so Western Montana Growers also works with us and distributes and moves food for us around the state. When we find something in another region, if they have space in their truck, they help us with distribution. So it's something to consider asking for if you're in that situation as well.
And I think I would echo what George and Maria have already said. Again, working really regionally for that more hyper-local focus, and also this intention to build an integrated Montana Food Hub network so that we can, it's already happening really, like Western Montana Growers Co-op is already taking food to Root Cellar Foods, which is another hub that's in the Belgrade area, and all the way over to Billings, to the Yellowstone Valley Food Hub. So this notion that we can move more local food around, we can encourage more and more value-add products like the bakery, Montana Marinara, that we can start to trade and sell and have like a parallel food system, and have a lot more availability. There's a whole lot of meat producers over in the eastern part of the state, and then there's that lushness that Marie talked about in the western part, and it's wonderful to be trading food back and forth statewide.
Are there any specific markets, centralized locations, or anywhere that you could go and order local foods? I mean, what's the best avenue for doing that, or are there multiples? And maybe Barbara is the easiest one to answer that one.
Yeah, really, I would say direct to producer is an awesome way to do that. And again, that's what these lists are for, is to start to really recognize who's in your region, whatever that means to you, and to build relationships with those people. And I think the other thing is these food hubs. So when we started this project, there were 5. That's Western Montana Growers Co-op here in Missoula, Root Cellar Foods in Belgrade, Yellowstone Valley Food Hub over in Billings. Whitefish has good farm and produce, and then Hamilton has the O'Hara Commons and Sustainability Center. And we've just had 2 new food hubs come online. There's now the Central Montana Food Hub that's in Martinsdale, and Good Mama Farm, which is also a hub in Harrison, Montana. And there's additional people in the wings. So really supporting those hubs that are aggregating and marketing so that producers can be out producing is an excellent way to start procuring food. And again, I hope we're going to have this forward-facing site on the Local Food for Local Families website, and just make it so much easier to have one place to go and look at available food in real time.
We use the list that she's referring to will become your Bibles, so make sure you pick those up because we have them and we love them. Another tremendous resource is I think almost every tribe has a tribal preference list, and so the tribal preference list has been really valuable as we think about or work through our conversations of how do we support. Arlie sits at the south end of the Flathead Reservation, so we want to make sure that as we're doing procurement, we're inclusive not just of Harlequin Farms, but also the other growers and the producers. So we've been able to get local meat from producers that are on the reservation. We have also procured some pork through a processing plant that they procure. We're able to procure that locally from an indigenous pork farm.
I guess I would just echo what both Marie and Barbara already said, using the listservs, the aggregate lists, but also starting as local as you can at your local farmers market, just approaching the farmers there to let them know that you've got interest in local food purchasing. We've found out that by supporting our local farmers at our local farmers markets through purchasing and through the token program that I spoke of earlier, they also support us in kind with a lot of donations of local food. When they have a surplus after a farmer's market that they can sell, or at the end of the growing season when they have a big surplus that they weren't able to sell because decommitments or just too much food, they've come to us and it's been a tremendous boon to our organization to have that. And then, places like Western Montana Growers Co-op is another great resource for that.
I have one more question, then I'll open it up to you because this is a big one. How do we secure funding to purchase these local foods? Because we realize that they are businesses as well, supporting our local economies, and we can't expect 100% donation. So where do we get the funding for this? Any suggestions for that?
That's the topic of the day, right? That's one of the biggest challenges I think that all of us face as nonprofit organizations. And in Livingston, we're super fortunate to have a strong donor base who really supports our mission, supports local. But we've also gone out and got specific grants. Last year, we were able to finally get a big federal grant from the USDA all around local purchasing. It's been a tremendous help to us, increasing our capacity. They're not the easiest grants. I think that we put close to 60 hours into our USDA grant, which is not, I realize it's not something that a lot of food pantries, especially ones that are volunteer driven, can do. But the funding is out there, and it's just a matter of going after it. And also just asking your local local community to support that mission, because when they support your mission of helping get local food into your food pantries, they're also supporting the greater local economy. With that, there's a lot of ripple effects, job creation, all kinds of things that come from local food purchasing.
As I think about the volume of food that comes in and goes out the door, and I think about people walking in and shopping and filling their carts, when they first came in and we were providing them with things like carrots and kale and potatoes and things that were purple and they didn't know what to do with them. I think Shelley came up with a really incredible idea that in collaboration with our local food movement, we've produced a program where we've been bringing in indigenous chefs and hosting cooking classes, which go along with being able to help people understand and better utilize the foods that we have been bringing together as important and local foods. But I think it's been a next step for us in being able to not just, give them kale and not help them understand what to do with it, but having recipes and doing different things, which have really helped, I think, incorporate. We don't have a nutritionist on staff, but we have been doing meal kits every other week, incorporating the local foods into the meal kits. So they go home with a brown bag that has everything in it to make an actual meal that incorporates foods that came from their community. So I think those are just some ways we love the local food, but we're also incorporating ways to better utilize it.
In terms of securing funding, these two know a lot more about the on-the-ground part of that. But I loved listening to Danielle right before the panel started, and that commitment to just earmark a portion of your existing budget to buy local. I once heard Walter Schweitzer with the Montana Farmers Union talk about if grocery stores would give just 10% of shelf space to Montana ranchers, what an enormous difference that would make. And I think that parallels, even if it's 5% or 20%, whatever you feel like you can do, that you start to build that sovereignty by forming those relationships with producers near you. And there was the Local Food Procurement Act money that came into the state, which was like $1.5 million, I think, specifically earmarked to buy local food. So we're hopeful that we will see more opportunities like that come. I think Bonnie, our executive director, is a grant wizard, and she would certainly invite you to be in touch with HOPA if we can be of support, and then with our local Food for Local Families partners. There's a lot of brain power there. Certainly, the Food and Ag Development Centers. I think just as we work together more closely, and finally, I would say the Montana Pantry Collaborative. It's certainly in our mind that once that Pantry Collaborative develops and you guys are have a stronger organized, I guess, group, we want to specifically do work to help research funding opportunities, and we'll be sharing that out with the Pantry Collaborative.
I just wanted to add, as I was mentioning, the things that we were doing to try to increase utilization of those local foods. We actually have funders who ask us how we're going to achieve sustainability, and I think what we're finding, and they're asking us, are what are you doing besides putting food on shelves? And I think that's an important piece for you guys to start thinking about as well. One of the things that Barb mentioned was the tools that Hopa Mountain has to help you. And I had never been in a position of having to ask for money before, and it's a difficult role as the leader of an organization to ask for funding. We're not trained to go and ask for money. We're trained to do our jobs that we do and do them very well. And I want you to know that Bonnie, Barb has mentioned Bonnie's name many, many times, and Bonnie has coached me and helped me, and I'm a person who's not afraid to ask for a lot of things, and I'm comfortable in a public speaking environment. But she's still coached me and helped me, so I would encourage each of you, if you haven't spoken with Bonnie, to reach out because she can help you access funding.
Well, I'm going to open it up to you folks for any questions that you may have. I hesitate to send the microphone on the other side of the speakers because it usually creates this horrible squeal. So if you have any questions, I would just ask that you kind of, if you can, stand up and project it, and we'll go from there. Any questions from the floor? I see a hand raised. Yes?
My question is this. Okay, I'm a nonprofit for 24 years. And I started out by feeding my people because that's the vision I saw then. And I opened up my food bank for 24 years. And I started on my own place. I had my ancestral land, so it would work. Because I'm on a reservation and I'm torn by different governments. So in order to keep my food bank secure, I use my great-grandmother's land, which was I inherited. So that, and it's on the foothills of the Battle of the River, where a lot of history is told about the battle. And so to heal, I opened a food bank to my people so that I can feed them. When I first started, I did it on my own by families who gave to the food bank. And through a friend of mine who was the one who helped me, that was from another state, an un-Indian friend, a true friend. And his daughter had helped me create this. Okay, the funding I got was from their individual money earning through their families and friends that had me going. And then as I became a nonprofit, a true legal nonprofit, I started going after monies to do my food bank. Now living on a reservation is a hard mission. Because first of all, we were controlled by the government. We were controlled by food politics. We were controlled by a lot of these different governments, state, U.S. government, and even tribal. They always say your tribe should help you, your tribal government should help you, but they're having the same problem of trying to get resources. So therefore, with my nonprofit, I started creating ways. So the first thing I did was buy a huge coffee roasting machine so I can bring money in. Then I opened up a gift shop so that I can get the tourists money, so that I can exist. So I existed, I thought you existed, and worked really hard so that there would be food I can give to my people, to my community. And I know what hunger is. I see it every day. I'm among it every day. You know, I eat with these people. I feed these people. And during the pandemic, that was the highest number we had. But because of the Navajos being recognized of their situation, somehow we got funding so that we can use. That was good, but we always still have those numbers. then different nonprofits, non-Indian nonprofits, and Indian nonprofits. They say they have a grant. You apply for the grant. I also do sovereign foods, my ancestral foods. But there's no place to buy those foods. So I grow it so we can have it. Because we, the Lati have their own ancestral foods. Every tribe does. They're all different tribal. Different tribes have their special foods, just like the Italians or whatever. We're like that too. So I have to go for grants to nonprofits, and I got involved with a lot of nonprofits, and on reservations and like little small communities, you have people who make up stories. When you're getting funding, you fight over funding on my reservation, There's that person can get funding, that person won't get funding. I saw all of that. But in order to survive, you gotta have your outlet. So the non-Indian nonprofits use hat harvest. I spoke for them. I say good things, they give me money. But as soon as they hear something bad, I worked with a nonprofit for 15 years, and I thought they knew me really well. But as soon as a rumor came in, they cut me out. I was getting a seed bank like that, the election for getting all organized, made money. And as soon as that rumor came up, all the nonprofits cut it out. By one nonprofit woman who said that I wasn't, that they shouldn't be funding me. So they all dropped out. I put in 16, maybe more than that, grants this year. I may get 2, still questionable, but where do you go? Because those people who think know you kind of turn their back on you, and the nonprofit, and they feel like.
And that is, from a funder standpoint, we could do a whole grant writing class, trust me, I think we've done them in this group before. Funders are not going to continue to fund year after year after year, number one. They're hoping that, there'll be some sustainability in that somehow, that you'll build that into being able to continue, whether it's your operations or a special project or whatever. That's usually one of the things I ask you is, how are you going to be able to continue this beyond the funding? And also funders will change their focus periodically. So they may be interested in food insecurity for a few years, and then they're going to be switching to childhood nutrition or something along that line. So if you want to continue that funding, you have to figure out how you can modify or look your approach a little bit differently for funding from that source. So nonprofit status, I know within the reservations is the key right there, because then you can get donated product. And then of course there are some federal funding out there that is just strictly for tribal governments and not for nonprofits. So you've got that advantage as well.
The sovereign part, okay, I may have to close my food bank next year because of the funding. Okay, I do sovereign foods too. I do both. So now I'm looking for, ancestral foods on how I can do that, because that's going to be a lot cheaper and it's still food, and it's going to come to a point where we have to all grow our own food because of what we eat, what's making us unhealthy. So that is what I'm looking for right now. And if anyone has any information in here that how I can get that kind of, funding for seeds, whatever, like I said, I lived in Gary, I lived in a
Yeah. Any recommendations for that?
Yeah, sure. First of all, thank you for sharing your story. Really inspiring. You should be proud of what you're doing for your community. And you're right. You know, the funding it's more challenging than it's ever been. And I think that there is a traditional model of running nonprofits that I hope we will break those barriers down now with our collaboration efforts. That that fundraising is a competition. There's only so many dollars out there, and so we've got to go get ours, regardless of what that means for another organization. And I think it's through like this food pantry collaborative that we've all taken part in, that hopefully that tide is changing, and that we are stronger together, and that we can approach foundations and show that we're sharing resources and collaborating. Not only on sharing food, but sharing funding sources, right? So it's true that there are only so many organizations out there, and like Gail said, they change their focuses. They can't, obviously they can't be expected to sustain the same organizations year after year after year. And so being part of a collaborative, I would encourage you to join our collaborative and speak with Hope Mountain Barb and Bonnie, and because we're working together and identifying funding opportunities as opposed to kind of keeping them secret for ourselves. We're going to help more people across the state, across the nation if we can go out and outreach that far and support each other.
Okay. We're getting into lunch hour, and I know you guys can probably all smell the barbecue back there, so don't want to hold up. But is there any more questions from the floor that we want to address today? All right. Well, thank you so much for our panel. They are going to be here for the rest of the day. So if there are any questions on local foods, feel free to come up here and grab any of the handouts. I'm sure Barb is available to answer any of the questions that you may have specific to those. And thank you so much for being here today. I definitely appreciate it, all three of you. We're waiting for the tech to get our slides up here. I also have up on the stage, if you have not met him yet, I can't believe that you have not. Brett Weisbrand is our Vice President and Chief Operations Officer. And I've invited him up here to talk about our new facility plans that we have, because so much of it is all about the warehouse and improving distribution and services to all of you. So I always love these slides, and I thought I would share this with you. We kicked off last year an education awareness campaign, and we were working with some consultants who came up with this really great concept of taking some beautiful scenery of Montana and adding some ridiculously large vegetables into it. So you'll see our vehicles driving around, and they'll have these phrases, Big Sky, Big Network, Big Sky, Big Impact, those types of things on it. And they'll have this ginormous apple or something around. So it definitely drives home that we cover a big state, and we cover a big area, and we've got a big job in front of us. So we all know that we could not do it without doing it together. So yeah, I wanted to share that one with you. I don't know if I'm hitting the right button. Anybody have? Or maybe you can drive? Or am I too far? There. All right. Well, you may have heard through the grapevine, but we started back in 2018, actually, and into 19, doing a feasibility study on whether we would be able to raise the funds for a larger building. The building that we're in right now, we purchased back in the 1990s, and we have expanded a little bit more, but we're about 28,000 square feet, almost 29,000 square feet. And this particular drawing that you'll see is our existing facility kind of overlaid where the size of the new facility. So we're looking at increasing to a 56,647 square foot warehouse office space. We did purchase some property in 2020, just down the street from us. If you're familiar with the Missoula area down on Expressway where our offices are, not even a mile down the road is the new Coca-Cola plant, and there is a property there, and we're back up against the interstate on that side. So we have some acreage, and plenty of room for us to not only build this facility, but to grow into for the future. So I just wanted to share these plans with you so that you can kind of see some of the things that we're looking at doing. And the reasons why. Oops, I went backwards. There. That's what the new building is going to look like, the artistic drawing of it, to kind of give you an idea. One of the issues that we run into, if you've been to our facility before, is semis, vehicles, volunteers, everybody pulls in and out of the same parking lot and the same driveway, and it can get pretty chaotic and pretty dangerous. So we are looking at separating you can see off to the right-hand side of the building there is all of our volunteer and office personnel will be parking there. And then off to the other side is the receiving area. And we have 2 loading docks and then 1 low area for loading for agencies. We will have 4 loading docks and one low area. So we'll be able to have a much safer in and out process for everyone and be able to do that. Also off to that side, off to the left-hand side there, you see that one little area that's kind of sticking out. That is the coolers and the freezers, which will significantly increase, if I can go back, the size. Right now we can take 30 semi-truckloads in our current facilities, 6 semi-loads into our freezer and 3 into the cooler. In the new facility, we'll be able to accommodate 70 semi-loads, so more than double. And our freezer will accommodate 14 semi-truckloads, and the cooler will do 6, is that? Yeah, hard to see. So we'll be able to double all of the amount that we'll be able to bring into that warehouse and then ultimately come out to you. One other thing that we have in there is the a kind of a quarantine area where we can then bring in product. Right now when we have product that comes in, we have to do a very quick inspection on the docks before it goes out into the warehouse floor. And that also makes it very challenging us to take any fresh foods in and fresh produce because we can't inspect it properly. So one of the areas that we have is a quarantine room where we'll be able to come in and bring that product in and be able to do an adequate proper inspection of it all before it goes out into the floor. Jump in anytime because I'm kind of speaking in your territory quite a bit as to what this all means to us. Brent, I don't know.
No, you hit the nail right on the head. Now, a lot of the produce that we get through the USDA and through commercial channels is already retail ready. It's washed, it's inspected, it's prepped, it's packaged, so it's pretty easy to handle. The opportunities that we miss out on is a lot of what is the secondary or surplus markets of produce that sit and they're waiting to go to market. It may be unwashed, it may be sitting in facilities ready to be packed. For us to get access to all of that product at pennies on the dollar is a goal of ours. And then but a lot of times that comes with little critters that like to hide inside the bags or things like that. And so as part of our compliance requirements, we're not allowed to bring product that could be possibly containing any infestation or rodents or things like that, which is natural, right? I mean, out in the farm fields, and you have bins, and whether it's watermelons or squash or gourds or anything while it's being packed. The other thing is we work through our Feeding America Regional Produce Co-op, and that's where a lot of the produce that you see that comes through our trucks comes from, the combination boxes and some of these other things. But we are continually growing our relationships with those growers, and a lot of what we're working through is forecast purchasing, advanced planning, reassurances that if they want to try new markets, expand markets. As we know, the margins are very tight for profit loss, but farmers need to change. They have to change to stay in the markets, and now we can give them that reassurance that if you have over surplus supply, majority of the time they'll donate that produce. And if all we have to do is maybe just help pay their harvesting and packaging fees. So there's a tremendous amount of that nutritious produce still out there that we're not being able to take advantage of, that once we have this in place, we're probably going to be able to get a return on investment of probably like 2 to 1 on what we pay currently for produce loads. So it's going to be a really nice investment. And then as we continue to hear discussions about local foods, one of the things is, and I always tell Gail, we're not a warehouse, we're a distribution center, because warehouses are designed to store things for long periods of time. Ours is to get stuff in and get it out. We don't want it sitting. We want it in the hands, out to your service provider, to you as service providers, to get to the communities in need. And so as we do that, we look at efficiency, quantity of scale, but knowing that we are going to be equipped with every opportunity that comes forward, that we are ahead of the scheme and we can take advantage of it. Because I can tell you on a weekly basis, right now, due to capacity and challenges, we probably turn down $100,000 worth of free food a week of possible donations and food that's out there that we can get access to once we get our capacity established. So this is one of the main goals of this facility, is to give us that capacity for the long-term sustainability of getting more access to the nutritious foods and being able to do it with a goal as cheap and hopefully free, or as cost effectively to all of you as possible.
One of the things that I guess there's always some silver linings that we could talk about out of COVID, as horrible as an experience it was for all of us, was the ability that we had then to work with some of the larger agencies in this room and serve as hubs for us, because we needed to make sure that food was getting out there faster and faster to all the local agencies. So we've continued with that, working with Flathead Food Bank, working with Family Services, working with some of those larger organizations, so that we can keep that steady flow of food to the pantries that are in those areas. But we also know that we wouldn't have been able to keep up with the level of distribution increases without all of that. Now, not that we're looking, proposing that we stop doing this with this new facility. It just means that we're going to have the capacity within our own house to be able to continue to increase that distribution. And you'll see, in a minute here, some of the distribution numbers that we've been experiencing over the last few years. Okay, that's the office. I guess what I wanted to show you is just kind of the entryway to the office. One of the things that we've been experiencing as well is as our organization grows, our staffing also has to grow. And I know when I started here 10 years ago, we had 19, 20 people. With the addition of No Kid Hungry, we'll be at 27, 28, something like that. But our offices aren't getting any larger. And if you've been in our offices, we do a lot of shared space. We do a lot of hybrid work, so they can share office space. And most recently, policy department had to move off-site. We had to leave some off-site office space to be able to house them, because we were just getting so crowded in our spaces. So we will be adding some additional office space, not only for now, but for future growth. We will also have a community room in there, so that we can do onboarding and volunteer orientations, and also host any events that any of our agencies would like to be able to do there. We also have a larger volunteer space. If you've been in our facility, we do some repacking of dry goods there, and that space will expand so that we can accommodate more volunteers. Right now, we can only do maybe groups of about 7 to 10 people at max, and we'd like to be able to do more of that. In that warehouse also will be space. If you are getting backpacked from us, you know that the cost on those has been going up considerably, because we have to work with a vendor that not only resources the contents of those products, but also assembles the bags for us. So by the time they come to us, they are already pre-assembled bags. Creates a lot of other things that go along with it, from lack of variety in addition to pricing. So we want to bring that in-house and be able to package those backpack bags in our own warehouse, so we can improve the variety and cut back on the cost of those quite a bit for you. I don't know if you want to add any more to that.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the things we're probably most excited about, because it gives us back that element of control. We do a lot of food sourcing, a lot of food purchasing. We're very well connected. Currently, we work through Feeding America and the national connections, and then additionally we work with about 180 different food suppliers, sourcers, and brokers. So we have access nationally to all the different available products. Our goal then is to be able to provide those individually unique items where we can do custom ordering, we can use local product, we can implement change, and most importantly, we're able to support more local producers and suppliers with that, and be able to expand it to make it available to all of you. So, and again, what the ultimate goal is to be more efficient and reduce costs. So.
This is just a better view of the loading dock area. One other thing that we're going to be adding is then the warehouse staff will have some better office space back there as well. Right now they're all crammed into one area. And we also have a driver lounge. We get a lot of long-haul drivers that are just looking for a break, a cup of coffee, someplace to relax for a minute while their truck is being offloaded. So we are looking at adding something like that as well. I think the final one I wanted you to take a look at is the why. I think we've explained a lot of the why we're experiencing and why we felt like we needed to go further into this. But I think the big thing that I always look at is in the last 10 years, our distribution has increased 119% out of the same size warehouse with virtually almost the same size staff. So we know that we can't continue to go at this pace. We know that the needs are growing out there. We hear from you about how you're getting more and more families than you've ever experienced. Families are coming back more frequently than they ever were before. And we want to be sure that we can be able to serve you now and into the future as long as we continue to do that. So all of the spaces that we're looking at are doubling our space, adding clean rooms, doubling our freezer capacity, improving all of our parking and our loading and unloading area. So those are the things that we really are trying to keep into mind is how we can better serve you into the future.
Yeah. Well, as we talk about being a distribution facility and not a storage facility, there is a balance with that, right? One of the key things that we've identified is that our strongest source of food continues to be USDA through our TFAP programs, through the other participating programs. It's the sustainability that we know is there. It's our tax dollars pay for it, and it's allocated. Right now, for the total food that's being made available through the USDA to the state of Montana, we're only able to take advantage of about 75% of it. We have to turn away 25% of the free food being made available to our state, to your communities, because through Helena and through us, we just do not have the capacity. And a lot of that is because it's based off agricultural market purchasing. We saw it when there was trade embargoes, through the pandemic, of course, when supplemental emergency need is being provided, as we saw through disaster relief, through all those different areas. The problem is it's like when lightning strikes, you have to do it. We have to commit to future egg supplement purchases through the TFAP program. We're already committing to accepting loads as far as the end of this calendar year. And we don't have that opportunity. You either have to accept it or turn it back. And of course, I'm going to accept all of it as much as I can before we give it to somebody else. So that's the balance of having that enough space to take advantage and know we have those reassurance. But we're anticipating that when we get into this facility, we're probably going to be able to make an immediate impact between that and the additional resources of putting more trucks on the road and more frequent deliveries to all of you on a regular basis, which is the other part of this, to get you that perishable product more timely, higher frequency, so that it's not just that every 6 weeks you get that one big shot. When we have this up and moving, we're probably going to be able to make an immediate impact of another 1.5 million pounds a year, if not 2 in the first year. So you're going to see a lot more, and that's just taking advantage of that USDA free food that right now we're turning away, plus those extra donations that we just don't have the capacity to do. So to help understand the impact, it's so critical to understand that, and I always say this, we don't exist unless to serve you, because we don't do food distribution. We are the entity that is the purpose is to get as much food in and out to you to help you do what you're doing every day. So this is going to be a tremendous investment, which is part of the name, right? The Montana Food Bank Network, because it is for the network. This is the resource that's going to pay dividends to every county in the state.
So probably the big looming question that you're asking that we asked ourselves is how are we going to pay for this thing? So we started doing fundraising 21 or so, it seems like eternity ago. And we are still in the quiet phase, so we have not done any public announcements. This is about as public, I think, as we have gotten. But we've been working with a lot of national and Montana funders and foundations, corporations, major donors. There's a lot of generosity in our state. We're still a ways to go. We also own our facility that we're currently in. We were fortunate a number of years ago to be able to pay that mortgage off, so we owe it 100%, so that'll go towards the new facility as well. So we are still doing that in our quiet phase. The board will be making some big decisions at our board meeting tomorrow as to when we actually do break ground. Including the cost of the building, we're at about 70% of the campaign. We do still have some more funding to go, and as you know, costs keep going up. Just to give you an example, when we first started looking at this, I think it was in 2019, before COVID, construction costs for a building bigger than this was about 62,000 square feet, was about $12 million. We shot our goal for the campaign to be about 14 million. Now, a couple of years ago, I think our last quote was, last year was about 16.5 million, and now with all our kinds of other soft costs of moving and furnishings and everything else, it's looking closer to 18 million. So we know we have a road to go, and we're hoping that we'll be able to see some success and to be able to go out publicly. Now, in the process of our quiet phase, we've been working with donors, and we've been holding a series of donor education events. And we had one in Big Timber last year. We just had another one in Missoula a couple of weeks ago. We have others coming up in Whitefish, in Immigrant, and in Great Falls over the next couple of months. And what we've been doing is inviting the local pantries to be a part of that conversation. So we can educate them on food insecurity in Montana, how this network works, introduce them to their local pantry if they've never met them before. And these are all donors that live in that community or nearby that community, and major investors. So we try to integrate you into that. We don't want to ignore you. We have found it to be very beneficial for the agencies that have been there. I know the follow-up on the Big Timber event, they had a board member that was there, and they said they saw their volunteers increase as a result of that. Missoula, we just recently had that one, and Missoula Food Bank was there, and we had Harlequin Farms was there. So we try to integrate. It's not all about us. We want to invite these donors to get to know us and the network much stronger. So right now, again, we have them planned coming up in Immigrant, Whitefish, and Great Falls. If we are anywhere near your pantry in your community, be assured we will make sure that we let you know and invite you to be present at those. We're not there to replace you. We want to make sure that they understand what a partnership this is. If you have any questions about the campaign itself, I think the expert is in the back of the room there. Bill Matthews is our Chief Development Officer. Todd Lingatcher was also around here earlier today. He has been working quite dedicated on that. And I think the other thing I want to add too is, like your organizations, we are 100% donation driven. Our operations and this facility more than likely will be as well. We've tried different avenues for state and federal funding and have not achieved anything as yet. I'm not turning it and saying no, but so it's a long road. We know that the donors here are generous, but we also have a lot of nonprofits in this state, and we don't want to step all over toes as well. Anything else that we need to add to that, Bill? I'm going to see if there's anything you want to add as well. So be on the lookout for our amazing trucks. You'll see them if you haven't seen them already with the big vegetables and fruit on the side of them. We also will let you know when we do go public. We'll make sure that we keep you in the loop on that, because we don't know what kind of questions will come up on the difference between what's a pantry, what's a food bank. We're always educating people on the difference between us and how we all work together. So we'll make sure that you are in the loop on all of that. Any questions from anybody on that? Yes?
I came in a couple minutes late, so I don't know if you said it already. Do you have a goal as to when this facility will be finished, or is that something you're kind of keeping on the down low until you get it?
We are working on that, and it all depends on how the campaign goes. We had our goal of actually, one of the with the timelines that we were talking about with breaking ground in August. And that's what the conversation that the board is going to have tomorrow is, are we ready for this? If not, we'll probably reconsider again after the first of the year. So we would really love to be able to be in the facility by 25, if not sooner. So we'll see.
Like 2 years ago.
Yeah. Here's into that.
Our ops team would contest to that. That's right now, it's scheduled so tight, if one truck is delayed, they're moving stuff twice just to make room for it and put it away. But you know what, they're great at what they do, and it's what we do, right? We're food bankers, we just say we figure it out, because that's what we do.
And we know time is of essence for many reasons. One, we've grown out of our facility, we know that. We are, still trying to find warehouse space and office space and everything so that we can continue in this growth pattern. We also know the longer we wait, the project's not going to get any cheaper. So we want to move along with that. So we're keeping that in mind as well and making sure that we are fiscally responsible and yet still can achieve our goal.
Danielle made a key point that I'll go back to, and we share the same philosophy that while this is a great vision, and again, this is a marathon, it's not a sprint, and we recognize that, but we also are committed and understand that we can't do this at the expense of programming. It does us no good to have a nice big facility if at that point we can't afford to provide service to the network. So it is a balance and it's a commitment, but rest assured we've had multiple discussions that if it takes another 2 years, a year, 10 years, whatever, but we'll get there, hopefully sooner than later, but we're not going to do it at the expense of programming. So.
Jill and I just had a little heart lapse there for a moment when he said 10 years. All right, oh, yeah.
Did you say where the location is? It looked like it was by the freeway maybe?
It is. If you go down on 90, down not too far from where we're at, and you will see that big Coca-Cola plant sign, we're right next door to that. Yeah.
Which will be nice come moving day because it's only 4 blocks
Yeah.
away. So.
Forklifts will be running back. What did you have? I heard somebody. Oh, okay.
You say where you at? And you were like telling her, and I was like, well, the Brown's there, but you're not there yet.
Yeah, not yet. We own the property. We don't have anything else there.
Well, the good news is we own the dirt too, which we got into before the most recent market went crazy. So
Oh, yeah.
we're ahead of that curve. So
We closed on that one of June of 2020, and it couldn't have been any better timing. All right, well, thank you so much for your attention and your patience, and we'll keep you in the loop on how things go. And again, when we do go into public phase, I will make sure that everybody is aware, either through the affiliate in some way, or we'll make sure that you know what's going on, so this isn't a surprise. But thank you, and I believe, is the next session in here, Eric?
Yeah, there's 2 breakouts.
Oh, 2 breakouts? Okay, so they're going to lead you the way of what rooms you need to go to. Thank you.
Okay, we'll go ahead and get started. And this presentation is going to be much more interactive, so I would love for especially our Native people who are here and people who work with tribes already to offer your perceptions and experiences. So it's not a one, these are all the answers because everyone has different experiences, and every tribal or Native community you work with have different experiences as well. So we'll go ahead and get started. So the name of this is Best Practices of Working with Tribal Communities. It should have been Native, it does say Native and Tribal Communities. So I use Native and Tribal separately because there are some Native American groupings who do not consider themselves tribes. They consider themselves Native nations. I'll give an example, the Onondaga Nation in New York or the Oneida Nation in Wisconsin. They do not see themselves as tribes, but as Native nations. So that's why I use both of those distinctions within both my title and in the presentation. I already shared a little bit about myself, but there's my email address and my contact information for those who would like to have it. And so I think what's important is to first talk about who are these people that we call native or tribal people. A lot of times we hear different terms that are out there: American Indians, Native Americans, Indigenous, First Americans, Alaska Native, Native Hawaiian. So there's all these different terminology that you hear out there. And I just kind of want to show, how they're used, and then who do you call someone like me, someone like Danielle. American Indians is mainly used by government entities and by researchers or academia. The treaties that the federal government has with Native and tribal communities they use American Indian. A lot of Native people don't like that because it perpetuates the mistake that Columbus, in identifying the people, that he thought he was in India or the West Indies, and so it perpetuates that myth of misnaming the people he encountered, the indigenous people. So Native Americans is used a lot by nonprofits and by the media. I use Native Americans, but there are some even people saying, well, if you're born in America, aren't you a Native American? So another debate about that. Indigenous is a term that's used, but it can include people from other countries who are indigenous to that land, who come from that land. So whether you're in South America or Asia, you have indigenous people. So that's another term that sometimes is used. Alaska Native, Native Hawaiians, they call themselves a little bit different because they're different groupings of indigenous people. First American is a newer term that's come across. It hasn't caught on yet. What I recommend is that you ask the person you're talking with or the community you're talking with how they like to be called. Many Native people identify with their tribe or with their nation or with their community and not so much the general aspects. So ask the person you're working with or the community who you're working with what they want to be called. The other thing that's important is to learn where we live. So you hear all these names, reservations. So not all tribes have reservations, but there are mostly a number of reservations, especially in the western area. You hear Native and tribal communities. Sometimes those are referred to with Native and tribal entities who do not have a reservation. In Alaska, they're called villages. In Northern California, rancherias. Southern California, missions, and a couple places in Arizona, there are missions as well. And then there's urban and rural. As I mentioned earlier, 70% of Native Americans live in urban areas. And they had to do a lot with our government policy to try to get to Native people to be assimilated. And then there's three types of ways that Native people are connected with their culture. You have those who are very traditional. So I think of like a lot of the Navajo people who speak their language still. They're very rooted in their traditions, their ceremonies, their cultures, maybe a little leery of outsiders. Then you have those who are bicultural, who are comfortable in both the Western world and in the Native world or their culture. And then you have people who are also called integrated, like myself. Never grew up on a reservation, never knew the language or the culture until later on in life. And so we're integrated as Western society Americans. So any questions on that? So another thing to look at is how many of us are there, where are we and how are we set up? So There are 574 federally recognized tribes. That means those tribes have a direct relationship with our federal government. That number goes up and down almost every year. Sometimes there's new tribes that are federally recognized. Sometimes there's tribes that are taking off the federal recognition for whatever reason. I could do a whole nother presentation just on what makes a tribe a federally recognized tribe, or how you seek federal recognition, or how you're thrown off the federal recognition status, but that's for another topic. There's 63 state recognized tribes around the country. Those are tribes that are not federally recognized, but they're recognized within their own state. I'm not sure if Montana has. I thought there was one tribe that was maybe state recognized, but maybe not federally recognized. Is that right? There we go. I knew that. I thought there was one.
They were state first. I think in the middle of the pandemic, I think in like 2021, they were given
Federal recognition.
It was like a blur because of everything else that was going on.
That's good to know. Okay, good. So that's probably why we went up in 2022. I think it was like 569 up to, because there were some tribes in Virginia that also got recognized as well as federal tribes. So when I lived in Louisiana, I worked in the governor's office, we had 4 federally recognized tribes, but 10 state recognized tribes, which is very interesting. It's the state with the most number of state recognized tribes, and I'll explain that in just a second. And there are 250 bands. So these are grouping of native communities who are not federally recognized or not state recognized. And to give an example of the state recognized tribes and also the bands is that I shared about the Trail of Tears and how tribes were forced from the east and the south into Oklahoma and to other areas. During that time of transition, some people ran away or hid out, went down to Louisiana, went down to Mississippi or Arkansas or other places, and they disconnected from the main tribe or nation that they belonged to. And so when the government forced these tribes to relocate, they started the Enrollment Act, which was the Dawes Enrollment, which made Native people have to be registered to a tribe and given a number. It was pretty much a prison camp system. The reservation system was a prison camp. It's a way to control and know who's in that prison. In fact, Hitler used the United States history of the way that we treated tribes to set up the concentration camps and to identify Jewish and other people who were part of those concentration camps. So reservations were prisons. And some of these tribal communities that were relocated. So these people who hid out and established settlements in other parts of the country were never reconnected with their other tribes. And in recent years, when they've tried to, the mother tribe does not accept them, or whatever reason, they're not part of that. And yet they're not recognized by the federal tribe, or by the federal government, or by the state. So it all depends. So the 10 tribes that are state recognized in Louisiana, some of those were tribes that took off from the Trail of Tears and came down to Louisiana to hide out and start a new life. So there's some Choctaw tribes down there. There's some, sorry, I don't remember the other ones, but there's like several of those tribes that were hidden away tribes. So that kind of explains that a little bit. There are 326 reservations, but look, there's 574 tribes. As I mentioned, not all tribes have reservations. Some share a reservation. So if you go down across the border into Wyoming, you have the Wind River Reservation, which is shared by the Eastern Shoshone and the Northern Arapaho tribes. It's interesting because both of those tribes were enemies with each other prior to this country becoming, and so I think the federal government put them together hoping they would wipe each other out. Well, it didn't happen, but there's times politically they don't get along, and so there's still tension at times because it was Eastern Shoshone land, and the Northern Arapahoes were forced to share that land with the Eastern Shoshone. So it's very complicated, these group of people that we're talking about that we want to learn how to relate and connect to. A lot of history of sometimes with bad blood, sometimes just, like I said, tribes torn apart. And you have tribes that also that are not given a reservation, but you have tribes that have more than one reservation. The Navajo Reservation, they have 2 or 3 locations within Arizona. Even though there's one Navajo Nation, there's 3 reservations. So it's a real kind of mixed pattern. And then even on those reservations, we have some reservations what we call patchwork reservations, meaning it was a large land and the federal government said, these tribes aren't doing anything on this land. Let's give some of this land to white settlers. So I know like on the Pine Ridge Reservation in South Dakota, there's all these beautiful big farms with big homes and beautiful fields filled with corn and other things, but they're not native owned. They're white farmers that settled in that area, but they're on the Pine Ridge Reservation. So it's a really strange conglomeration. So it's so important to know the history of the native nation or the tribal nation that you are going to be communicating and working with. A little bit about population. So there's 6.79 million, 2% of the US population, at least in the 2020 census. We've grown since the 2010 census from 5.2 million to 6.7 million. But we even think this isn't accurate. It was during the pandemic. It was during the time when Trump was president. And so a lot of people we feel didn't really register with the census because of those situations. So it's really difficult to know the exact number, but we have grown. It's also a very young Native American generation. A lot of tribes, the average age is like 24, 26 years old. So we lost a lot of elders during the pandemic, unfortunately, a lot of the knowledge keepers. But we're a young nation, as I'm talking about all Native nations throughout the country. Those are the states that are listed with the highest population. Of course, Alaska being the largest percentage, is over 200 tribes in Alaska with 20%. And look, Montana is 5th down the line at 8%. Something to note is before colonization, there were about 18 million Native American people living in this country, we call Turtle Island, Mother Earth, whatever we want to call it. Different tribes had different names. In 1880, during that census, it was 188,000 was the count. We almost were wiped out. But fortunately, we're resilient people, and we've come back to 6.79 million. So, some little known historical facts. Native Americans didn't become U.S. citizens until 1924, and that had to do with World War I. One of the generals who served, and I don't remember his name, recognized that there was a huge percentage of Native people who served in the military during World War I. And he's like, these people aren't even citizens? And so he got Congress to act, and they passed the Citizenship Act. The other thing, too, is it allowed Native Americans to be able to freely roam around the country. Because you were only, if you're in a reservation, you were stuck in your reservation. You had to get permission to go to other parts of the country. So, 1924. It wasn't until 1962 that all 50 states allowed Native Americans to vote. New Mexico was the last state in 1962. The other thing I wanted to mention is that Native Americans have served in the military at a higher rate percentage-wise than any other racial or ethnic group. You've heard of the Navajo code talkers. There were other tribes that also had code talkers who they believed really helped us win World War II, especially with the Japanese. From 1870, I mentioned this earlier, that Native Americans were banned from practicing any religious ceremony, whether it dealt with farming, with harvesting, planting, hunting, but also like the when a young girl becomes a woman, or a young teenage boy becomes a man, those rituals. It's interesting that our country, founded on religious principles of freedom, would not allow Native people to practice their ceremonies and their spirituality. Prior to colonization, we already talked about them being healthy and vibrant communities. So here's some unique things, and I did kind of mention these this morning. The food system, 60% of foods are now used around the world. One thing I did mention that I do want to mention, so we all know the Thanksgiving story, and I have a whole different presentation just about the mythology of Thanksgiving. When the Puritans came to this country, and for some reason we gave them the name Pilgrims. They weren't Pilgrims, they were Puritans. They were being persecuted for their belief. And so they came to Massachusetts, what we call Massachusetts now. And when they came here, they did not know how to farm or hunt. And so when they arrived here, they almost starved to death. And it was the native communities in that area who taught them how to farm, how to hunt, how to fish, how to survive. And so that first Thanksgiving meal was the first year that the Puritans had a harvest. And what they did not know how to do was to hunt or fish. So they wanted to celebrate their first harvest, and so they wanted to go out and hunt. And so the men were out there with their muskets trying to shoot at deer, and the tribe nearby heard the gunshots thinking that maybe they were being attacked. So they went out to see what was going on. There was about a party of maybe 90 or 100 native braves that went out there to investigate. And what they saw is these Puritans trying to shoot and ending up almost shooting themselves. And so they said, what's going on? They're like, well, we're having a festival because we have our first harvest. Thanks to you all for teaching us how to plant food, but we don't know how to hunt. He goes, we'll bring the food, we'll bring the meat if we can come and join you all in the dinner. And like, okay, so the native people went out there and they hunted, brought back deer and pheasant and other things like that, and fish. But it wasn't like when we grew up and were taught and saw in our history books where everybody was sitting around the table, everybody was laughing and telling stories, and big turkey on the table and all that stuff. No, the native people sat on this side and the Puritans sat on this side, and they barely spoke to each other. They were afraid of each other. The native people were afraid because their experience with settlers and people who came from other countries brought them disease and almost wiped them out. So the actual Thanksgiving celebration that happens today was actually when Massachusetts became a colony. One of the white settlers was found dead, and they blamed it on the Pequot tribe that did not have a treaty with the Massachusetts colony. And so they went in and wiped out the whole Pequot tribe. And so the governor of Massachusetts colony said, this is a day of Thanksgiving. We got rid of these savages who are a threat to us. And that's the actual day of Thanksgiving that we celebrate. George Washington wanted to institute it. He didn't get to do that, but Abraham Lincoln instituted it as a federal holiday. So that's the real Thanksgiving story. It's not the one that we grew up in the books where we all wear pilgrim hats and feathers, everybody sitting at the table happy. It's a whole different story. Sorry, I got off track on that. Yes?
Their tribes, the tribes that are a part of the original story, have children's books. Children's books have chapter books that you can educate yourself with. This year I bought my son the children's book, and he was 7 years old, and we went over the history of it. One of the things he brought out of it was that he wanted butternut squash at Thanksgiving dinner. So we do wild game and we do indigenous foods to reclaim the holiday. Definitely encourage you to learn more about that.
Really good point, Danielle. There are a number of people who, once they hear the real story of Thanksgiving, it's like, does it mean we don't celebrate Thanksgiving anymore? No, celebrate it knowing that the native people gave food security as a gift to those who settled in this country. And maybe our gift back is helping native people to have food security now. So there are people who make choices and say, we're not going to celebrate that original Thanksgiving that we grew up with, but we're going to serve some ancestral foods, squash corn. Some of those are already incorporated in the Thanksgiving meal, but to make it intentional, saying that we are in solidarity with those Native people who brought food security to our settlers. So the other thing I want to mention too is we hear a lot about food deserts. And living in the desert for a number of years myself, people from those tribes down in Arizona, New Mexico, Southern California, Nevada, it's an insult for them to call a lack of food a food desert. Because as I mentioned, when I went food foraging with some people in the Sonoran Desert, there was tons of food to be found. So a lot of Native people call it food apartheid, which is a systemic issue. It's a systemic problem, not a location problem. So just to kind of plant that little seed in your mind that we don't prefer food deserts, we prefer food apartheid because it's a systemic issue. Some things to look at that impacted the history of tribes. So when you go in to meet with Native and tribal communities, that you have this understanding. The forced removal and assimilation, which we talked about earlier, prohibition from ceremonies, when they became citizens, the vote, colonization numbers. Native Americans are the only group that have to prove they exist in order to have a relationship with the government or even their own tribal community. There's some tribes that have enrollment that is by ancestral lineage to prove that maybe your great-great-grandmother was, someone influential in the tribe. Those enrollment records that we talked about when tribes had to sign up, people had to be enrolled and given a number. Some do blood quantum, which means a percentage of your blood quantum, your DNA has to be a part of that tribe or showing that you came from that tribe or that community. I've talked about Native Americans serving this country at a higher rate, and Native Americans also contributed greatly to medicine, health remedies, but have the highest rate of diabetes and comorbidities than any other group. So many, you talked about the teas and how the teas were healing. That's so true. The gardens that Native people also grow, the herbal gardens, are just as important as the food gardens because the medicines that help us keep us safe and to keep us healthy and to keep our bodies in tune are just as important as the food we consume, whether it's a tea, a tincture, a salve. Those medicines are important. I've worked with some of the Lakota tribes in South Dakota who now do these emergency kit, like you have a little emergency kit at your home medicine cabinet, with the Band-Aids and salves and, things like that. These tribes are creating their own herbal medicine kits where they go out and pick sage or different, salves and things that they can use to create a home remedy kit of natural herbs and medicines. So Native Americans invented antiseptic, aspirin, suntan lotion, things like that we don't even think about it. We go to the pharmacy and get this and that. So many of those came from Native people. So just something to think about. So here's some unique things about working with Native and tribal communities. Tribes are sovereign nations. What does that mean? Well, in the way that they relate to the government, it's like the state of Montana having a dialogue with Congress or with President Biden. They have a state-to-state relationship. That's the same with tribes. Tribes are equal to state in that status of their ability to govern themselves, to have their own police department, their own fire department, their own infrastructure to operate as a tribe. So that's what sovereignty is about. It's about protecting their citizens. It's about ownership of data and information. There's been a lot of researchers that have come in. There's been a lot of nonprofits and churches that come into reservations. They take data and information, and then they make money off of it through grants or through donors who contribute. And the tribes or those people never see a penny of that. There's been times when medical researchers have come in and taken blood samples, DNA samples, and no one knows what happens to that. So tribes are very protective of their people. So if you're looking at doing a survey, focus group, be very mindful of those kind of things, because groups have come in from the outside and just, have ruined that relationship of trust with Native and tribal communities. So if you enter into a tribal nation, they have a different set of laws and protocols that are important to know. I'm going out to the Onondaga Nation this summer to visit, along with the other members of the Haudenosaunee democracy, known as what we call the Iroquois Confederacy. It's the Seneca, Onondaga, Tuscarora, Mohawk, Oneida, and then also the Onondaga. And I have to be escorted at the very beginning to the Seneca Nation. They have to do a cleansing ceremony over me. And then I meet the leaders there, and then they all accompany me to the next nation, who do the same thing until we get to the Onondaga Nation. So I have to go through 5 nations to meet with the Onondaga leaders and go through rituals of healing and cleansing. That's their protocol of how you meet with leaders. I don't think you'll have a problem in Montana with that, but there are tribes that have, they're very protective of their people. They have traditions and cultures and procedures that you have to follow and respect. Food is sacred. We talked about that this morning, so I'm not going to go into that too much. Relationships are primary. We are all related. We're all connected with each other. And so you build relationship before you do anything else. And if you don't have a relationship with someone from that tribe, you need to make a relationship with someone who knows someone on that tribe to build that relationship. Trust and respect and authenticity are so important. And yet, those are things that are most difficult to build if you're an outsider. Build relationships before business. So get to know each other. Share who you are. You'll find a lot of Native people introduce themselves. The Navajo, it takes a good 5 minutes for them to introduce themselves in their language, because they have to identify who they are, who their parents are, who their parents are, their clans, your maternal clans, your paternal clans, because that identifies, if I'm with another Navajo person, that identifies how I'm going to relate to that person. Are they a relative? Are they someone that I can joke and play with? Is it someone that I am going to be an uncle for, or that they are going to be an auntie for me? So there's a relationship dynamic that happens through those introductions. So when you meet with Native people, please let people know who you are. And it's not just your job title and where you work, but who's your family? Where are you from? How did you grow up? What was important to you? What are those values important to you? It's all about relationship building. Family systems are extended and complex. So I was talking with Peggy, and there's someone that we know mutually. She goes, "Oh yeah, he's my brother," but they're really cousins, but you're brothers and sister. So we call people family who may not have the same blood flowing through the veins, but we're related in some way. And so family is a concept beyond just, oh, this is my blood cousin or my blood uncle or aunt. Relationships are much more complex. I remember for an organization I worked for, they would only give bereavement days off for blood relatives. It had to be a parent or a child or a sibling. But when an aunt of mine died, it was like, my aunt is like my second mom. She helped raise us. She gave us influence. She was part of my immediate family. So this organization changed their bereavement rules because you determine who's a relative and who's not some organization. So, so family structures are so much different. So get to know that. I may have someone who's my grandson who's 20 years older than me. So it's all related on how we see people and how we're connected with them. Elders are the wisdom keepers and influencers. Always respect elders. They're the ones who keep the culture and the languages alive. They're the ones who are the real influencers of the tribe. It's not so much your elected leaders. Elected leaders have to listen to elders. Elders always go first when we eat. They're the ones who usually lead the prayer or the welcoming address. They're the ones who have the final word. And that's pretty much in most Native cultures throughout the country. Decisions are based on impact of past and future generations. You've heard seventh generation before. So many of our tribes look at, when we make a decision, we don't make it just about today. We make it looking at 7 generations. How is it going to impact 7 generations down the line? And then also, what would our ancestors say in this decision making? You know, it's interesting that our government at the federal level is based off the Haudenosaunee democracy, which are the 5 Native nations I was talking about earlier. But they didn't accept everything that our government didn't model. They didn't take everything about that democracy that exists, that still exists, and has been existing for thousands of years. And the 2 things they didn't do was, one was they didn't allow women to vote. Now, fortunately, that's changed throughout time, but women within these nations had equal say with men and equal vote. The other thing was that they didn't make decisions with one mind, which means that it's not unanimous, but everyone has to agree to live with the decision that's made. And then the third thing was, what is the impact on future generations? When our Congress meets and when they're looking at the debt, they're thinking about June 1st. They're not thinking about how is this impacting 7 generations. Almost every, congressional act and decision is not based on future generations. It's about getting through something right now. So that's an issue. Native people think differently. So remember that when you're meeting with them and you're expecting an answer or a decision, there's going to take more time with that. Time and space are a different understanding. I remember when I first moved to the Navajo reservation, there was a family I wanted to go see, and there are no street names in some of these roads. A lot of them are dirt roads or unpaved. And so I asked directions to this person's house. I was like, oh, yeah. You go down to the windmill, and when you get to the windmill, make a left, go over the cattle guard crossing, and then go a little bit further, and then you'll see them. I'm like, okay. So I'm driving. Where's the windmill? 12 miles down the road was the windmill. And then another 7 miles to the cattle guard crossing. And it's like, so distance is a different perception. You'll also say, well, some people, Native people, use their faces or gestures. So, hey, where can I find a nail? She's right there. Use your lips to point, because it's not nice to point with your finger. So there's cultural things you'll have to learn about time and space. When you start a meeting at 10 o'clock, it may start at 10:15 or 10:30. It'll start when everyone's there and it's ready to start. But if you expect it to end at 11, it's not going to end at 11. It may go on till most of the day, because people want to be in relationship and you be with each other. If you're bringing people in from all over the reservation to get a survey, to do a focus group, don't expect them to be there just for 1 hour. They want to socialize, they want to get to know you, they want to build family and community. So time and space are different dimensions. Time is not linear, it's secular for most communities. Challenges of working. This is one thing I'm really glad to share with you about. So when I came to Feeding America, one of the biggest obstacles our food banks had shared with me is that because many tribes are not 501c3s, or I should say all tribes are not 501c3s, but some tribes don't have a 50c3 organization within their entity, tribal entity, that there is an IRS tax policy that provides extended tax credit for those who do product donations. That's why Feeding America gets the Walmart and the Albertsons and the Krogers to donate big quantities of qualitative food. And then we were able to give it to food banks, and the food banks are able to distribute it to their partners. But when it comes to distributing it to tribes, you have to have a 501c3 or a faith-based group. And it's been an issue if your only option is a faith-based group, and that faith-based group ran a boarding school that assimilated people and abused children, or they will only give out food boxes if you come to their church service. So those aren't the right partners to partner with. And so this has been an obstacle. And fortunately, thank goodness for our U.S. Tribal Relations Director of USDA and Tribal Relations Director at the U.S. Department of Treasury. They came up with a solution for Feeding America to help resolve this issue. It's a simple tax fix. We don't have to remove or change the tax code at all. It just needs a simple legislation. We're going to get that. We're working on that right now, which will open the doors for our food banks and partner agencies to work directly with tribal leadership in getting food out. That promotes tribal sovereignty. It promotes program ownership by Native communities and not just becoming a program of the food bank. So it'll be a game changer for that partnership opportunity. So that's what that first bullet point's about. Many reservations are geographically remote, so the cost of shipping food out and distributing food is so much expensive. And doing it the way that is important to them is the right thing to do. Sometimes tribal government and politics are an obstacle in getting things done. I remember, and this is not to put down the Navajo Nation at all, but during COVID, the nation said, we are going to take ownership and operate all COVID relief to all our chapter houses and to all our communities. So any organization that wants to donate, you have to go through tribal government. So in my former job, there were some communities that reached out to us and said, hey, listen, we don't have any food, we don't have any supplies, any masks, and our tribal government hasn't given us anything yet, so we're still waiting. Can you send us stuff? So yes, we'll send out a truckload tomorrow. We sent a truckload out there. A week later, we get a call from the same community. We never got anything. We're like, what happened? Well, we had to take it to the tribal headquarters, and they were supposed to deliver it. Well, they decided it needed to go someplace else. And so that community never got any food or any supplies they needed. So I'm like, oh my gosh. So we kept finding this happening over and over. And it's like, we don't want to go behind the tribe's back. And yet the tribe is saying, well, it's needed somewhere else. But sometimes these tribal council members are looking for votes, and they're going to take it to the community that has the most votes. And we'll get that support when they're up for re-election. So what we found is that one of the contracts is John Hopkins is with the Navajo Nation has a contract for John Hopkins to provide all health services on the reservation. And they said, listen, you send the food to us, you send the supplies, we'll get it to the community. And it's not to go against the Navajo Nation, but to make sure that those communities and those people have the food and supplies they need to get through this pandemic. And it turned out to be a great partnership between our organization and John Hopkins. So tribal government can sometimes be an obstacle to getting food out there to those who need it. I mentioned the food apartheid. Cultural awareness, every nation is unique and distinct. Each has their own traditional and ancestral foods. And COVID-19 is still impacting tribes. Some reservations still require you to wear a mask to go onto the reservation. So be thoughtful of that when you visit. And here's some best practices. Do your research. When you visit a community, check out their website. Find out what's going on. Read their newsletters. Learn what's important to them. Learn who their leaders are. A lot of them have their history on their websites. Read as much as you can, and even then you won't know enough. Ask, but do not expect to be taught. And that includes, the history or the culture or the protocols. Also, learn how they're called. So a reservation may have a different name than the tribe. So the Pine Ridge Reservation in South Dakota is the name of the reservation, but the tribe is Ogallala Sioux Tribe is the name of the tribe. The Navajo Nation is called Navajo, but they call themselves Diné. That's what it means, the people. So know those distinctions. Connecting with tribes, establish a connection. It may take some time. Reach out to trusted organizations who already are working in those communities. Be flexible, whether it's to meet in person or virtually. Let tribes tell you what they want. Respect when they do not want your help. We can't go in there with the saviorism attitude or model. Let tribes guide the project. Let them take as much ownership as possible. Bring Native experts to the table. Uplift tribal priorities. That knowing that tribes best know how to serve their own communities. Let's entrust them to do that. Offer funding and technical support. When developing a relationship, meeting in person creates trust. That trust building, that relationship building is so important. Consistency. Make sure that you don't have a different staff member going out there each time to visit the tribe. Pick one or two people and let them go out there and develop the relationship. Provide meals when you meet. I think I mentioned this morning, don't just bring food, throw it on a table and say, hey, everybody help yourself, we'll meet while we're eating. That doesn't work in Indian country. You serve the food, prepare the food in the cultural, meaningful way for that community. Like I said, maybe the elder needs to do a blessing. Maybe you have the elders go first. You do the spirit plate. Whatever it is, learn from the people. It's not just about bringing food and serving food, but it's how you serve it, how you eat it together, how it's prepared. And bring plenty of food. And be attuned to lactose intolerance, diabetes, those other issues. So don't bring just donuts when half the community, have diabetes. Bring a small gift for your leaders. If you're meeting leaders, tobacco, sage, cedar, something that is herbal or important, the tea. That means a lot to me, Danielle, so thank you for gifting that. Compensate those with lived experience. If you're going to have a focus group and want information from people, bring some gift cards or bring some cash, pay them for their time. A lot of them probably had to drive miles or hitch a ride with someone to get there. Address transportation needs, meeting with local leaders and elders. Don't be surprised if the whole family shows up. So if you're thinking only 10 people, I've only invited 10 people to this meeting, you may have 10 families there and not just 10 people. Because if the grandparents are raising the grandkids, or there's extended people in the family, and they're all hungry, you can't just feed one person in the family. Build relationships before conducting business. Be prepared to start late and stay late. I mentioned that earlier. Understand that time is stay. Okay, I mentioned that. Listening and nonverbal language is valuable as speaking. Be comfortable in silence if nobody responds to your question. People are processing and thinking. Don't make promises you can't keep. This happens so many times. So many good intention organizations go in, we're here to help, we're here to do this, and then nothing happens. Be clear about your purpose and what you want from them. A lot of them go, why are you here? What do you want from us? So be clear about why you're there. Be cautious for asking for data. I already shared that. Always ask permission if you're planning to have a survey or focus. Eye contact. Even like on the Navajo Nation, you never give a hearty handshake. They'll give out their hand, but it'll be very kind of like, because a hard grasp is like domination. So just be aware of those kind of things, those protocols. Practice patience when speaking and listening to tribal elders. When people have a microphone, they give Native people microphone, they'll be on there till they're done. And that could be an hour from now. So just be aware that people need to give time and space to speak their mind and their heart and their thoughts. Okay. I'm going to pass this, but anyway, thank you all for your time. Any questions, any comments? I'd like to, for our Native people to be able to share too. A question back here.
I'm with MFBN and I work with people with experience, and I've been working a lot with like tribal communities and such. And what we've run into, or at least like heard of, is that there is a lot of like families that are starting to save food and provide it for others and that kind of stuff, and it's become like an unofficial food pantry, which is lovely and awesome. And then we hear about these other organizations that want to support them, but they don't have that 501c3 status. So I'm just really curious about, you said a potential solution to that. I didn't know if that was like something that was in the early stages or something maybe like sooner down the pipeline, or.
You know, that's a good point. And there are a lot of like mom, pop, startup food pantries out of my garage, out of my carport. And I think it would be important to support them, but to see maybe if there's a way that consolidate with existing food pantries who get resources. Could they be in partnership with them? Or could they combine their resources together so there's not competing entities with the same one? Because what happens too is that you may have a family goes to your local food pantry run by the tribe or by a 501c3, and then they go over there, and that someone else doesn't get that. And there's always, sometimes, and this is something I had talked about with some individuals, there's a lateral violence that exists with tribal communities as a result of colonization and forced removal, where Native people compete with each other, tribes compete with each other for grants and funding. That's why there's not like we have the National Congress of American Indians, but there's not like a united front with Native nations, because we were taught to be competitive with one another. And the lateral violence is when one person succeeds or does well, the rest try to bring that person down. Peggy's had that experience with her own community. And so that's something we need to change. So I'm not sure. I think it would be good to talk with that person who's running that little food pantry from home and connecting them with the local resources too, to see if there's something that can be done to reunite those resources. That'd be my recommendation. Anyway.
I caught a glimpse 2 slides ago. It started, the bullet point started to say, don't use electronics to initiate communication. But I didn't read the rest.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I probably went too fast. Always, yeah.
How do I go about it?
So setting up, having someone in from that community be your connection and open the door for you. And then you can follow up with emails and other phone calls. But I think having someone who can, if you don't have a connection with that community, identifying someone who does, or an organization that's already working there that has a trusted relationship with that community would be important. Otherwise, your emails and phone calls will go unanswered because they don't know who you are. Even if you're like, I'm here to do all kinds of great things for you. Like, no, we don't even know who you are.
My organization has a relationship, but I don't, because I'm new to the organization, so maybe I can be introduced
Yes.
to somebody else in our organization who has that relationship.
Yes, so someone from your organization who has that connection, and then that person in the community can welcome you and And like I said, go and present yourself and build relationship with them yourself. Even though your organization has a relationship, build relationship for yourself with them. My native friends, yes, Peggy.
I live on a checkerboard reservation. The Crow itself owns 3.3 million acres. So during the pandemic, well, even before then, I was serving the farmer population that are not Indian around me. And a lot of them were widows who didn't have money because their husbands never put in time with the government or jobs or whatever, so that was never recorded. So there was a lot of hunger in these homes. And they have children just like a native do, and just like my people were suffering from is not enough food to give. So with the nutrition kind of program, well, with the products that came in, I started inviting them more. At first they were very shy, but they came in, and then pretty soon now, they come in. And when I had large amounts of raisins and all those nuts, and there's plenty of them, and they come in with their baked goods, like their nut bread, or whenever we have a lot of bananas left over, oranges, whatever. And whatever I give them, they make things and are able to bring stuff, and that's really good. That's right. And then when it comes to the numbers and measuring the food and all this, governmental attitude a lot of organizations have, is really hard because I'm culturally a person who really works with people. And I don't look, if a person comes, I will not look for any reason not to serve them. I serve them anyway. And it doesn't matter what color they are because we all have that same suffering. So now I'm required to, okay, if you gave me a refrigerator or a freezer, the food bank or any organization who gave me a refrigerator and a freezer, they want to know how much amount of food that goes in there and how much amount of food goes out. And I have to measure that and then send them the paperwork of these figures to see how many people I serve. That takes a lot of work because, okay, I have all these people I share. I also have I don't only use the food you give me, but I also have the ranchers who would bring in elk for me, and I go and get my own buffalo from my tribe. We do the slaughtering and everything for the year in October. And then I also do all of this exchange with local tribal hunters. The problem is when my freezer is always overload, a lot, and I'm always giving it out a lot, and I'm supposed to keep count, and I wonder about how the food banks ever keep count of shipping their trucks, and that kind of slows me down because I'm culturally, as it is, I have to answer to everything. I do governmentally, not only that, statewide, you have your inspectors come in and, you're worried about you have to keep clean and, which is always, we as Native people always, I guess some don't, I don't know. because I haven't been into any other food banks but mine. So what I'm saying, I guess, is that when I get equipment, I have to bring in figures all the time of how many times I go out with my truck, my push truck, I use for a delivery truck. I use my own vehicles to use it. I only got one food truck that goes out. And I go out up to 3 million acres, how many I serve. And the numbers I give, they think I'm making up. And I'm not making them up, I'm out there. So how would I be able to make these agencies accept what I have? Why can't they give me how many trucks go out to each reservation every year? Or, I never see those numbers.
Right. Peggy, you bring up a good point. You have a native heart and a native mind, a native way of thinking and living that sometimes goes against Western rules. Even at Feeding America, we're having discussions because a lot of our metrics was based on how many pounds we get out, how many dollars we raise. And now we're looking at what's impact mean? What does impact in different ways? So how are we really centering our neighbors? So it's a question, I think, that's valid in regards of, there's systems we have to do to get funding, to get support. But you have been operating as a Native person with a Native heart and a Native way of doing things, which you don't count, you give when it's needed. So don't lose that. But I think there could be a way of maybe also balancing something. Maybe someone could help you. We can get some help for you to keep the numbers, or just so you can keep getting funding and food in. So, Danielle, did you have something to share?
Yeah, so I'll be fast. One of the slides that we also skipped over was DEI committees, right? How many of you come from big organizations or from communities that serve diverse people, but there's no diverse people on staff, right? DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion. Equity is different than equality, and really look into that. I did a presentation for Montana Food Bank's DEI, see nothing but impact and change from that. They listened and they made these changes, right? They allocated food just for culturally appropriate foods. They wanted a list of what are culturally appropriate foods. They wanted to bring Native food pantries together because we don't get to talk all in one group, right? To hear about what Peggy's struggles are, to share how we keep our data and why we do it that way. I think that's a very important thing is if you do not have a DEI, if you don't have diverse people on staff, start a DEI. If you buy food from big entities, like Montana Food Bank Network, approach their DEI. What Peggy's talking about is something that can be brought to a DEI committee, and then they can help source, right? Whether that means Montana Food Bank Network is working with Hope Mountain to find some grant money to be able to hire Peggy somebody to do that, to do data. And I also think that's a really good point, right? Bringing that to DEI, like we give all this data, we want to see data back. We want to know how many Native out of the 350, not going at you, Montana Food Bank Network. I'm just giving some examples of how just Peggy's comment right here could make changes and see results, because that's one of the big things, right? Don't make promises that you can't keep, but make relations where you're listening to both sides of it, right? We pay money, we give data, and one of those things that can come back to us too is how much money is spent by Montana Food Bank Network. How many of the 350 partners are Native or serve Native communities, which then will help increase that those entities all get more culturally relevant foods. And then it's not just about Native communities, but what other diverse communities does your community have there, right? If an Asian family goes into your pantry, are they going to be able to find foods that they want to eat in their homes? And that's the only comment I had to add to.
Yeah, thank you, Danielle. That's so helpful. And I apologize for skipping that slide. I will make my slides available so the food bank could share them with you all to be able to use as a resource and for educational. Sorry, I had to skip that. We ran out of time. But thank you all so much. And Amanda, I apologize for taking over. I'm sorry?
Can you tell me the meaning of an Indian giver?
That's one of those horrible derogatory terms, you know, that someone's going to give you something and they want it back. And that's one of those racist terms that have been used against our people. So thank you all so much. Appreciate it.